I'm Tracy Sabol. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, calls for peace. New developments in the fighting between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Taking the stand, lawmakers grill Attorney General Merrick Garland over allegations of targeting pro-lifers. And an apostolic zeal. Pope Francis honors an Italian saint who fought for the freedom of slaves in Africa. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the Feast of the Korean Martyrs. Our top story tonight, the United Nations took a major step today in adopting a declaration covering pandemic preparedness and response. Part of that resolution includes language promoting abortion as an essential service. It opens the door for abortion on demand worldwide and has caught the attention of pro-life lawmakers. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales joins us now with more. Eric.
Good evening, Tracy. This United Nations initiative, known as the Pandemic Accord, has been in the works for several years. Now, the goal is for UN member nations to better prepare for future pandemics, but critics say it also includes language promoting abortion access around the globe. The World Health Organization, which receives $600 million U.S. tax dollars per year, is collaborating with the UN to make this happen.
From the beginning of the COVID pandemic, UN officials called on governments to liberalize their abortion laws, to preserve abortion access during the pandemic, including making abortion an essential service.
Stefano Gennarini is the vice president for legal studies at the Center for Family and Human Rights. CFAM works together with the United Nations delegates to promote protecting human life and family. He tells me today the UN General Assembly is adopting a pandemic preparedness declaration, which includes abortion as necessary health care, which the Biden administration supports.
The United States openly said that they would promote sexual and reproductive health as an essential service in the pandemic treaty, which we know, given the Biden administration's support for abortion, we know this to mean an attempt essentially to create an international right to abortion.
Right now, Congressional Pro-Life Caucus co-chair Congressman Chris Smith tells me the resolution language is deliberately vague, opening the door for countries to make their own assumptions to expand abortion access.
And it's all about empowering the non-governmental organizations and telling them to bring down the right to life laws all over the world. It's right there in their guidance.
I think that we're in a moment where people have to draw a line in the sand of what they will and will not tolerate. And for the pro-life community, they are now seeing that the work isn't just here at home. It's not just in our state capitals. It's not just here on Capitol Hill. It's a global fight that we have to undertake as well.
It is important to note that today's declaration is non-binding. However, next May, a pandemic draft document is expected to be presented to the World Health Organization headquarters in Geneva. Now, both the United Kingdom and the Biden administration support the accord, but all countries must agree to the language in the document, and some say that'll be difficult to get everyone on board. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Joining us now is Valerie Huber, founder and president of the Institute of Women's Health. Valerie, good to be with you today. First off, I want to get your thoughts on the UN including abortion as part of its pandemic preparedness declaration. What does abortion have to do with the pandemic?
Well, what does it have to do with healthcare? What does it have to do with women's health? What does it have to do with the mission of WHO and the pandemic? Absolutely nothing. Abortion's not a right, or is it otherwise an essential component of healthcare, or as they state, essential healthcare? It doesn't belong there.
It seems there's really a push, or at least a focus, on abortion at the UN. But what about improving women's health by providing, better access to prenatal and maternal care around the globe, or putting money into things like pro-life pregnancy centers? I mean, Valerie, are there any efforts on that front?
Well, look, the declaration has some good things in there, and the UN and WHO do some good things for women's health, but it's almost always occluded by the ideology surrounding abortion. When you go to countries around the world that are in the greatest need, you really hit the nail on the head. Women and girls aren't receiving what is life-saving, what's necessary for them to just survive, let alone thrive. Abortion has no place in this, and we need to reorient our priorities. And really, that's why a coalition of nations came together, because they are tired of this ideology. And so they've united around the Geneva Consensus Declaration. But I think what we saw happen today at the United Nations is disgraceful. And I believe that many countries didn't realize that abortion, asserted as a human right, was included in what was seemingly a non-controversial declaration.
Yeah, Valerie, and I was going to say that leads to my next question. If a country is part of the UN, when it comes to something like this, I mean, are they bound to it in any way? And what can they do if they don't agree with it?
Well, there are more opportunities, but countries need to, first of all, become aware, involved, and very engaged next year at the World Health Assembly. The declaration today is non-binding, but I will say that sounds a lot more safe than it really is, because declarations become the blueprint for policies that emanate from the United Nations agencies that then become funded programs going into countries around the world to press these very ideologies. In addition, some countries, when a resolution or a declaration is adopted at the United Nations, it becomes binding by their national law on those countries that are pro-life and pro-family.
Valerie, what do you think can be done to better promote a culture of life on a global scale rather than death like what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, we have seen over the last 20 plus years this effort to change what should be promoting health and life into promoting abortion and death, and really taking over the narrative of health for ideology. I think the first thing that needs to happen is that countries, activists, NGOs, academics, healthcare providers need to understand the language that is shrouded, but yet promoting agendas, and not just promoting agendas, but asserting things like abortion as a human right. This becomes soft law that then can become binding on nations, both through international courts and through other instruments and vehicles. So it's a dangerous place to be. So being aware is one thing. And then once aware, countries need to be courageous, bind together, and expose what this agenda is really about, and then bind together to oppose it. I think we saw last year during the UN General Assembly that countries did just that when similar language was introduced in a resolution. And they said, no, not on our watch. We will not support any wrong assertion that abortion is somehow healthcare or that abortion is somehow a human right. That needs to increase.
And Valerie, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much for weighing in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Attorney General Merrick Garland testified before lawmakers today. He struck a defiant tone in his appearance before the House Judiciary Committee. The nation's top cop said the Justice Department is independent of the White House and Congress. Republicans say there is a two-tiered system, and Americans are taking notice.
I am not the president's lawyer. I will add, I am not Congress's prosecutor. The Justice Department works for the American people.
Well, they're truly scared. They're scared to voice their opinion at school board meetings, profess their faith in Catholic churches, and now they're afraid of being targeted for prosecution.
Republican Jim Jordan blasted the Attorney General for the DOJ's plea deal offered to Hunter Biden. He also questioned the prosecution of former President Donald Trump for allegedly mishandling classified documents. Some are calling for the Attorney General to be impeached. President Joe Biden met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. President Biden telling reporters that his commitment to Israel is ironclad. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, despite that commitment that you mentioned, the two world leaders certainly do not agree on everything, including Netanyahu's contentious plan to overhaul Israel's judicial system. And keep in mind, Netanyahu has yet to visit the Biden White House. And one U.S.-Israeli relations expert predicted it was going to be a sour meeting. President Joe Biden sitting down with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, each sharing warm words.
Welcome, Bibi, and I hope we can get some things settled today.
Thank you, Mr. President. Joe, we've been friends for, I've checked it, over 40 years, and our friendship goes a long way and can take us a long way.
But President Biden also saying the two would discuss some of the hard issues.
And that is upholding democratic values that lie at the heart of our partnership, including checks and balances in our systems, and preserving a path to a negotiated two-state solution, and ensuring that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon.
I appreciate, Mr. President, your continuous commitment to prevent Iran from achieving nuclear weapons capability. I think that's critical.
Later, President Biden meeting with his Brazilian counterpart, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, today rolling on a partnership on workers' rights.
When organized labor is engaged and involved, everyone does better. The wealthy do better, everyone does better.
Also, separately today, the Biden administration launching the American Climate Corps, aimed at young adults who will be planting trees, installing solar panels, and exploring careers focused on the environment. The program faced strong opposition early on over the cost. Today, the administration writing, the American Climate Corps will focus on equity and environmental justice. Now, tomorrow, Thursday, President Biden welcomes Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the White House. This as President Biden is requesting an additional $24 billion in military and humanitarian aid for Ukraine as it continues to battle Russia. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Keeping an eye on the economy now at the Capitol, Congress continues to hammer out to work out a federal budget before the September 30th deadline. And there are new developments in the auto workers strike. The United Autoworkers are in their 6th day of striking against the big three automakers. Negotiators are back at the table today. And joining us now to weigh in on this and more is Joel Griffith, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, good to see you as always. A lot to get to here, but first, let's start with this federal budget. House Republicans put forth a plan that would balance the federal budget over a decade, but that likely won't make it through the Senate. Where do you see this going?
Well, unfortunately, even that balanced budget proposal is scant on details. And we've seen Republicans and Democrats come together far too often over the past several years to greatly expand federal spending. So I think having a plan is a start, but Republicans need to hold firm, particularly conservatives that are in Congress. One of the amendments has to do specifically with the border crisis, and we need to be able to focus on that more firmly. A lot of what the other side, the Democrats in particular, have put forward when it comes to the border is actually just going to provide a lot of social services for those who are here illegally, and it does nothing to actually strengthen our border security. I think it's imperative that conservatives in the House and in the Senate hold firm and demand that any potential budget agreement includes funding to truly get border security under control.
Joel, do you think we'll actually see a government shutdown? And if we do, what would be the impact for everyday people, including those who are maybe less fortunate and rely on federal programs like, say, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program? I mean, will they still be able to get help?
Well, we've seen numerous government shutdowns over the past several years, including all of your listeners. And most people were not even aware when the government did shut down. I think it's important to note that if there's a partial government shutdown, our military continues to operate, Social Security benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, all those payments continue to go out. And through all of this, we need to remember that our government does not have a revenue problem. We are at near all-time record tax revenues, both in terms of dollars collected, but also in terms of dollars collected relative to our economic output. What we have is a spending problem. We already had one prior to COVID. We saw spending explode during COVID, and it has really continued to be a huge problem throughout the Biden administration. If you look at the amount of money we're spending right now, just on the interest on the federal debt each year, we're talking about $10,000 per family of four. And the amount of money that we're borrowing this year alone to fund our federal operations It's $25,000 per family of four. We're spending $80,000 per family of four. Each person listening tonight should ask themselves, are they truly getting $80,000 worth of government services in exchange for all that spending? I think the answer is a resounding no.
Joel, we have probably about a minute left or so. I quickly want to pivot to this, the auto workers strike. I want to get your take on that, and what type of impact do you think this is having?
Well, the strike is having a big impact already. We've seen hundreds of layoffs, thousands more are likely to follow. And these layoffs don't just impact the big three automakers. It has an effect all the way down the supply chain to the many hundreds of suppliers to these big three auto dealers. The big labor bosses, once again, are putting their own interests first. And I'm talking about the interests of the labor bosses and not the interests of the consumers, the businesses, or the employees. The typical employee right now at a big three auto worker earns around $60 per hour when you factor in benefits. The unions are demanding an increase in labor costs of close to 40-something% over the next few years. It could actually increase labor costs to $150 per hour. There's just no way that this can be afforded without severe future layoffs. Ford, for instance, has already offered close to 20% pay increases, and they've offered to ensure that those pay increases are protected for inflation. But the union bosses are demanding more. They're centered on themselves, and this is a big reason why we've seen so many factories and so many jobs move to more business-friendly parts of the country, in places like South Carolina and Tennessee, as factories close and move from places like Washington State and Michigan, where these big labor bosses have so much control over the economy.
Yeah, we'll continue to watch it and see what happens next. Joel, thank you so much for joining us. Always appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And we have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including Glimmer of Hope, an update on the supposed ceasefire between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Azerbaijan and Armenia say they have reached a ceasefire agreement to end fighting in the contested Nagorno-Karabakh region. Officials say in 2 days of fighting, nearly 36 people were killed, including 7 children. Protesters are demanding more protection for Armenian Christians in the disputed territory. And we go now to Craig Simonian with the Peace and Reconciliation Network, who is in Yerevan, the capital city of Armenia. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. I know it's really late where you are right now, but can you give us a sense of what it's like on the ground? Has the fighting actually stopped? There have been conflicting reports we're hearing.
Yeah, it's conflicting reports because while there's been a ceasefire, there's the fighting or shooting hasn't in fact ceased. There's shooting all over Artsakh still. Over 200 people have been killed, nearly 400 wounded. But I mean, technically speaking, there is a ceasefire in that there's been agreements, at least some temporary agreements between Azerbaijan and the local Artsakh government.
Craig, can you tell us, what's part of that agreement? Do you know? And who actually brokered the deal?
Essentially, the Azeris started about 24 hours ago, just a bombardment of all different various cities around Artsakh. And within 24 hours, it was very clear to the local people and the local government that they couldn't defend themselves. So they essentially raised the white flag and went to the negotiation table with Azerbaijan. So that's where it has really left. Basically, the initial requirements we're hearing now is the dissolution of the government, a disbandment of Artsakh's small defense, also certain things that they're wanting from Armenia, like opening up our southern corridor so that Turkey and Azerbaijan can have a connection point. So I think we're going to see a lot more demands over the next few days.
Craig, who do you think is benefiting the most from the ceasefire deal? And do you think it's going to stick?
Well, it's going to stick in the sense that there's really nothing Artsakh can do to defend itself. I mean, we're talking not just Azerbaijan, but Turkey as well. So that's NATO's fourth largest army. So there's simply no way Artsakh and Armenia can defend itself at this very point. So it's just a reality that people have to live with. It's a terrible thing to feel so small and not be able to protect your land that you've really had for millennia.
Absolutely. What does this mean for the Christians in the Nagorno-Karabakh region?
Well, I mean, we have a terrible precedent here from 1915, from the genocide where 1.5 million Armenians were killed. And But even in another Armenian region on the other side from where Artsakh is, in Nakhchivan, over 10,000 Armenians were killed in a single massacre. There's not a single Armenian in that region now, and it was 70% of the population some time ago. So it's really hard to say what's going to happen to those who stay. Frankly, I think a lot of people don't believe a lot of them will be here a year from now. So it's a really scary time for the people of Artsakh. They either are going to have to leave, or if they stay, it's really iffy whether they're going to survive.
Yeah, it's a really concerning situation. Craig, thank you so much for taking the time for us. We really appreciate it. God bless you, and we're praying for you all over there.
Thanks so much.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, speaking out. Alleged victims speak out against Father Marco Rupnik. Plus, strong in faith, a look at daily life for Catholics in Armenia. Armenia is recognized as the first Christian nation. It embraced the faith starting in the year 301. The majority of its citizens are with the Armenian Apostolic Church, but there is a leader for the Catholic minority as well. EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser filed this report to discuss daily life for Catholics prior to this week's military actions.
There's a clear and present danger of a genocide happening again in Armenia. Could you tell us a little bit more about the situation on the ground?
This danger exists, and especially it's clear in front of the people in Nagorno-Karabakh, surrounded, close, and practically there is no in and out, and the people suffering. They passed already several months, and nobody is trying to find a solution and to give the minimum right to the human right of these people. And practically, when you have over certain number of people that you're planning or you're surrounding them in a way to be to die, it's a crime. And this is what is happening now in front of the eyes of the whole world of the 21st, 22nd century.
Men, women, children are starving. They don't have access to medication.
Absolutely nothing.
But there's aid waiting more or less at the gates of the region.
And this is my question also at the same time. Where are you, powers, international powers, and people that you're working for the democracy, you are working for the justice, for the human rights? Where are you, United Nations? All these people, all these authorities, all these kind of arbiters of the justice in front of these pictures. And I have to be also very just in front of myself. It's not a question of the Armenians only. There is so many other corners in the world, they're suffering the same thing. And this is the question, to come back to our conscience, human conscience, before to be believers also.
What role does religion play in this conflict? Especially Armenia was the first Christian country really in the world.
We believe, and we are faithful to our belief, and we are also, we hope, not only hope, we are certain of the help and the assistance of God, even though the whole world will be against it. Because we believe in God, and we believe, and we preach that, and we're witnessing it.
What could be done at this moment to help the people in Nagorno-Karabakh?
Invite them to reconciliation, but with one condition. I want to repeat the same thing that I said it so many times, with one right. No winners, no losers, because both sides of any kind of human fight, there is always both sides losers, both sides winners. Depends from which corner I look to the text.
Thank you very much.
On new developments tonight regarding a Jesuit priest and well-known artist who is accused of sexual and spiritual abuse. Alleged victims of Father Marco Rupnik say they are bewildered after the Diocese of Rome praised the art school where abuse allegedly took place. The diocese also said the school is free of serious issues. Accusers say it, quote, ridicules the pain of the victims, but also of the whole church. Well, finally tonight, Pope Francis highlights the importance of a saint who fought against slavery in Africa.
I catechisti sono un tesoro della Chiesa. I catechisti sono coloro che vanno avanti nell'evangelizzazione.
During his weekly address at the Vatican, the Holy Father spoke of Saint Daniele Cambone. The missionary saint witnessed slavery in present-day Sudan and routinely called out the horrors of the practice. Pope Francis said that Cambone's dream was of a church who, quote, makes common cause with those who are crucified in history. We thank you for watching tonight. And remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.